Alright, this is a add-on to the previous video. Like if you see when I hover on this section, let me refresh this page, hover on this section, you'll see the stagger effect. What do I mean by stagger effect? First the cake name comes up, then the paragraph, then the list item. So let me show to the second section the same thing. This two sections are created with single code. That means you don't have to repeat the JavaScript for each section. Now, for a better understanding, I would recommend you to watch my previous video, which is paragraph stagger effect. So it had a very simple HTML, and the understand for this video, to understand the stagger effect, if we had a very simple code, then it would be easy to understand. Now here in this case we would be having multiple elements, so it would be little confusing to understand. I would recommend you to watch this video and then come and join here. So it's just an add-on to the previous video. What do I mean by add-on? Previously we didn't have the mouse move effect, now we have a mouse move effect. That's what I meant as an add-on. Cool. Now to understand the HTML, we have a container. Just note the container name, because which is very important to reuse our JavaScript code. So I have given the intro section as a class name, so which is very important. Then we have a container and a row. This row holds two columns, so the column names are important. So the first thing we have to note is the intersection, and second the column name. So the first column is empty. You can see the first column is empty, and the second column holds all the HTML. So the second column is important. So for the JavaScript to understand, we need intersection and the call to. These are the two major things that we need to note. Other than that, for each element inside the column 2, to have the stagger effect, we need to have the class called anime. So anime is there on the heading, anime is there on the text content, anime is there on the UL element. So if you see, this is the heading with the divider, and then we have a text content which is the lorem ipsum text, and then we have the list item. So each of them have the class called anime. So the three things to note, and I have just repeated the same code again. In this case, the column 2 is at first and the column 1 is at after the column 2. So in the second one, you can see column 2 is at first and column 1 is blank. Fine. Now let's get into the JavaScript. Let me just save this script, and if you need a better responsive code, just uncomment this. So for simple understanding, let me just go through this. Now we have a main container which is intro section. Since we have multiple intro section, I have used the query selector all, so it is stored into this variable. So we can access individual intro section with the help of for each. So we can access the individual element with the help of for each. Now if suppose there is two intro section, this two intro section can be accessed one by one. For the first for loop, the one by one holds the first intersection. For the second iteration, the one by one hold the second intersection. So I hope this is clear. If that doesn't clear, uh, if if that doesn't make sense, I would recommend you to rewatch the video again and continue with it. Now as we know, intersection, inside the intersection we have a column 2. So that's what I have stored here. The one by one, if suppose we are at the first intersection, the one by one simply means the first intersection. Inside the first intersection, we are storing the column 2 into a variable called intersection 2. Now that's clear. And again, in the intersection we have multiple anime. You can see I have used the query selector all. That means we have multiple anime and have stored into a variable called all anime. So I'm going to access this intersection one by one with the help, and one by one, as we already know, we are accessing it one by one inside the for each loop. Now this one by one, I am attaching an event. Here in this case the event is mouse enter. So once I enter into the intersection, this function will be executed. Again, I'm saying for better understanding of this code, I have clearly explained it into a previous video. Just watch it and come back here. Now if this is clear, now once I mouse enter into the intro section, we would see we would make the column 2 by default. With the help of CSS, I have made the column 2 as opacity 0. That's what you can see here. By default it's 0, so once I hover on it, the column 2 shows up. The column 2 shows up with the help of opacity. And this all enemy, if you remember, inside the column 2 we had three enemy which I have stored it into a variable called all enemy, and I'm again accessing it with the help of for each loop one by one. So if you see, we have a stagger effect going on. The stagger effect, it's because of the set timeout. If you know the set timeout function, it will execute a certain lines of code after certain amount of time. I repeat, set timeout function will execute certain lines of code after a certain amount of time. So that amount of time is here, and the line of code is this one. So what I have made is, I have, after a certain amount of time on the anime, give the opacity of 1. So you can see the anime is getting the opacity 1, but after a certain amount of after a certain amount of time. How I have achieved it? So here is the tricky part. Now all anime, we know the paragraph has the class of all anime. So we have 3 anime. So this index, if you see, index is nothing. This we have passed 2 parameters. The first one is anime and the second one is index. So if you know, the anime is nothing but the first iteration of the paragraph, and if it is first paragraph, the index is 1. So if it is second iteration, the this would be the second anime, and this would be the index of 2. On the third iteration, if there is, this is the third anime and the index is 3, and so on. If you see, this is index 3, this would be 3 into the delay which I have mentioned here, which is 500 millisecond. So consider this as a 1 second. So if it is third paragraph, the index is going to be 3, and multiplied by 1 second. So 1 into 3 is 3 second. So the third paragraph will be displayed with the help of opacity after 3 second. So that's what it is. And again, on the intro section, I have added another event listener, which is mouseleave. Once I leave the mouse, you'll see the column 2 is getting the opacity of 0. So that's all for this video. Thank you so much for listening. Get the source code in the description box.